Today is Saturday, October 1st, 1988. My name is Ray and I'm an alcoholic. I invite you to listen to an open Al-Anon speaker at the Shenandoah Valley Roundup. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this tape.
I hope everybody's as happy to be here this morning as I am. This has found Massanutten Springs and this Roundup to be a real place of love, peace, and serenity. Will you join me this morning in the serenity prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. She's been around the program for quite a few years, and I'm sure she has a wonderful, warm message for us this morning. Help me welcome Georgia from Washington, D.C.
Good morning. I'm Georgia. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. I'm already feeling intimidated here. It's my first time to the Shenandoah Valley. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington. So when I say I'm from Northwest Washington, they keep thinking it's Northwest D.C. It's real confusing. But it's real pretty. I didn't know what it was like, so I'm sort of enjoying the trip and the people. You know, Alan made me feel welcome when we started talking yesterday. Thank you for that. And it's just like the AA, I'm supposed to talk a little bit how it was and how I finally got to the Al-Anon rooms and how it's changed my life since I got here. And that's a lot to tell. My first memory as a child is watching an alcoholic stepfather beat my mother. And dealing with the situation of a father who, when he did not drink, was a very loving, caring father. Gave me my first tricycle, gave me my first doll, took me on my first fishing trip and put a fish on the end of the line to make sure I caught one. Now that was the alcoholic not drinking, you know, and I couldn't ask for a better dad. When he drank, he came home and he turned the dinner table upside down because the gravy was cold, you know. And he'd break my mother's nose or jaw, and the police would come and the ambulance would come, and would scream a lot. And that was the father when he drank. And for a child, that just somehow got real confusing, you know. I really started having memories at about 3.5, and my mother was pregnant with my brother. And I was all excited about this baby brother. I didn't know it was a brother, but I knew it was a baby coming, and I was real excited and wanted it. What that baby did is it gave me a responsibility at 4, because when the fights broke out, my stepfather was a truck driver, and he used to like go to a place called Texas Tavern. And he wasn't a very big man. He was only about 5'9", so when he'd get in a ruckus with bigger men, he would come home and take care of his frustrations at home. I think that's what a lot of it was. And so what my job came to be was I would snatch up my baby brother and try to stay one room ahead of the fight. And sometimes I couldn't get out of the room. And I remember being in the back of a closet hanging on to my baby. You know, and that's sort of how I felt too. It was my baby, it was my brother, but my mother was so busy trying to defend herself from the active alcoholic and then appease the dry alcoholic when he didn't drink that she didn't have a lot of time to mother, you know. And so I remember being in the back of the closet hanging on to my baby brother, hoping he wouldn't cry, trying to keep him quiet so that they wouldn't know we were in the room while he beat my mother. And we used to run away. I knew how to run away real quick. You pack a box, you go down the Greyhound bus depot, and you go to Grandma's, you know. And Grandma was a bit of a religious fanatic, so when you went up there, you got to hear Bible stories and get taken to camp meetings and told, you know, do it this way. And so both sides of the spectrums had a lot of rigidity. You know, it was like there's only one way to do it, and it's my way. A lot of control issues. I'm also the grandchild of an alcoholic. My mother came from a family of 11 kids, and her father's drinking had gotten to the point that the community ran him out of town because it was during the Depression, and the only way the family could get financial help was if there was no man around. So my mother was raised in a home where alcoholism had a very dramatic effect, and she was sent out on farms to be sort of a surrogate wife during the summer to be able to survive, and dropped out of school at 15 and was away from home by 16. And so she didn't have a whole lot You know, what she had is she had a lot of desire to be a loving parent. She hadn't got a whole lot when she grew up to be able to do that. And it took Al-Anon to teach me that. For a long time I resented her. I was real angry with her because she hadn't nurtured me and she hadn't cared for me. You know, and I had to get up and find something in the fridge and take care of myself in the morning. I had to learn how to hide and how to be quiet, and she used me as a person to talk to. You know, she was in 4 marriages, and I always knew when the divorce was coming and why it was happening and everything about it. You know, and that for a child, that sort of takes away your childhood. And it took a while for me to realize she didn't know any other way. You know, she had come from the same environment, and it took recognizing alcoholism as a disease. You know, she was just another victim, you know, of the disease. She had been touched by it. She had been affected. She had been deprived of a childhood, you know, and so therefore she really didn't know how to give her children a childhood. She just knew how to survive, and she taught me that, and I'm real grateful, because if she hadn't taught me how to survive, I wouldn't be here, you know. She taught me how to just get through. Don't quit. And there are a lot of us out there who nobody even taught them that, and they quit, you know. If you stay around the Al-Anon rooms long enough, you hear about people who deal with the alcoholic situation. The only way they have out is basically suicide or end up in one of the mental hospitals, you know. And we sometimes forget that the Al-Anon sickness causes as much insane, self-destructive behavior as the alcoholic has, you know. And so anyhow, she finally, being a good Al-Anonic sort of person, she had no problem with being beat herself. That was apparently what she felt was okay for her. I suspect, having gotten in touch with my own feelings, that she probably felt she deserved it, that there was something she wasn't doing right as a wife or a mother or a daughter, and therefore it was her due. But what happened is he went to take a swing at her and he hit me. Now there's something about us Al-Anon types, man, you can do total devastation to us, but you mess with people we love and we become totally, we get real bad. And call it Mama Bear syndrome. And Mama Bear took out. He kicked my dog, hit her, and I got in between, and apparently I got nailed. And that was when she finally left him, and left him for good. In the interim, my brother was born real sick. By the time he was 2, he'd had 12 major operations. And the reason he was sick is when my mother was pregnant, my stepfather kicked her down the stairs and beat her. And so he almost died. And I spent a lot of time in county hospital lobbies, sitting on marble benches. And there were some strange philosophies in this home. One, orange juice was considered a luxury, so my mother snuck that to me. Sawing wood for the fire stove to heat the house was woman's work because it was cut inside. You know, and I remember sitting on logs while my mother was pregnant cutting wood because that was woman's work that was done in the house. And I spent most of my childhood up until I was in about 4th grade in Texas Tavern. I did not see my first child till I was put in public school. Now I knew how to talk to a longshoreman, a truck driver, a fisherman. I knew about hooking up a keg and shuffleboard and pinball. I knew how to keep adults happy, and that is in the state of Washington. You can keep a child in the bar if they keep eating, and that's a problem I continue to carry with me. You know, orange pop, pistachio nuts, and ice cream was my diet staple. And you know, so I learned how to keep people happy. Do what they want, no matter how you feel, and don't tell them how you feel. You know. And a few times I tried to exert myself, I ended up getting in trouble. I remember learning how to do somersaults, and I was so proud of myself. You know, our kids they just learn something new and they just want to share it. And I'd been in that hospital lobby in the county hospital for a while, and there was a man there, and I remember he talked to me, and I was so pleased with myself, I wanted to show him. And I showed him. About that time my stepfather came down, and I got an ass whipping and sat back down that marble bench and was told, "You don't move." And I kiddingly say I got great training to be a nun. And I'm not even Catholic, you know. But I learned to sit for hours with my hands folded in my lap. Don't smile, don't talk, don't react. You know. Basically what children in alcoholic homes end up finding out is it's better to be a robot than a human being. You know. And so what basically happened is I finally got put in school, And I didn't know what these little critters were. I mean, they were strange. They were small. They did not talk the same way. Their vocabulary was definitely not the same. Someone before this meeting said, "You're going to clean up your language, Georgia?" I said, "I'll try." So if something slides out, it's because my first vocabulary was a truck drivers and a longshoreman, you know. They did things with a ball and squares, and they talked to one another, and they all sort of dressed alike. And my first disillusionment, but my first attempt to change my feelings by changing something outside myself was then. I had long red hair, had never been cut, and it was braided, and I looked like I should have been put in parochial school because my mother was into the little plaid skirts and the Peter Pan, you know. And at that time the girls were wearing little crinolines and, you know, all this good stuff, and they all seemed to have brown hair and it was curly. And I got it in my head that if I got my hair cut, I would have brown curly hair, my clothes would be like theirs, and I'd know what to say and how to act. And I remember carrying on and pleading and crying, and they finally gave in, but they gave in by taking me to a barber shop. And I ended up looking like a red-headed fat Dutch boy on the paint can, you know. That was dreadful, you know, and that was my first sense of there's something wrong with reality here, you know. My hair stayed red, it stayed straight, and my clothes stayed ugly, and I still didn't know how to interact with these other kids. And my memory was standing at a chain link fence with my fingers like this, tears running down my face, wondering what I had done to my mother that she would send me someplace like that. You know, I didn't want to be there. It was punishment. I knew it was punishment. We lived in a neighborhood where all the buildings around were warehouses. And so I didn't have any kids to play with, so I just would get on a city bus, get dumped off in this school, get back on the city bus, and put back on this front porch. And then sit and worry whether or not the man was going to come home drunk and beat my mother or come home and talk to me. You know. We left and spent a little bit of time without a man around. My mother's a good Al-Anon in that area too, you know. What makes her is a man on her arm, and so she couldn't go very long without one, but she tried it for a while. And I love her dearly, but she is of that old school where, you know, she didn't have a man until she wasn't worth anything. And I'm real grateful Al-Anon's taught me that enhances my life, not make my life. And so she did cocktail work, and my mother has a little bit of a drinking problem. She acknowledges that she is an alcoholic and that she can't drink, and when she does drink she has a problem. It's considered socially unacceptable to get on top of upright pianos and sing dirty Irish ditties. And she is not a maudlin crying drunk. When she drinks to have a good time. And she has basically stopped. This last time she got on the piano, said that was unacceptable behavior. And I think she figured it was too late in life to go catch another one, so she decided to stop. But it's real tough. It's real tough. Sometimes it gets real frustrating and real hard for her because she's not really dealing with the feelings that the disease has, or the feelings of being a child of an alcoholic and having been married to one. But during that period is when I learned to take care of myself. You know, I learned to don't wake the grown-ups up, get your milk, get your graham crackers, read a book. And those became my friends, books. Reading was my escape. Reading was where I could make life better. You know, the people in those books became real to me. And I remember people being real confused because I talked about the individuals that were in the books and they couldn't understand who I was talking about. And I liked historical novels, which meant it was even stranger, you know. And Florence Nightingale was my favorite. I wanted to be the caretaker she was. And somehow that was going to give me my place on earth because I'd already realized that my place on earth was real shaky. You know, people came and went. It seems like if you did something wrong, you could be gotten rid of. And so I really didn't realize that it was okay for me to just be here, just be me. You know, I just felt I had to earn that little square foot that I was going to take up. She remarried and life sort of progressed on, and I continued to keep the feelings, you know, as I was growing up, of not fitting in. And what I found is that it was easier for me to deal with not fitting in by becoming more of a rebel, you know. So what I did is I copped a whole attitude and philosophy in life of I am going to be very different. You know, I will not be in the mainstream. I will always be the one who has the political view that's opposite of everybody else. You know, I'll be very more radical. And so I ended up building a personality based upon I can't fit in and I know it, so I'm going to be as different as I possibly can. And I've done a real good job of that through my life, by the way. I'm very good at being different. There are a lot who will confirm that for you if you need it. Life sort of went on. My mother did what most of us do if we don't get some help. She went from an alcoholic to a compulsive gambler. Both were wife abusers. I am quite astounded sometimes of my concepts aren't worse than they are because of the things that I saw and heard in the home. You know, when I was about 17, my mother left this other husband and married another one, and this one us kids picked. And well, she'd only made 8 years on any marriages up to this point, and I was about 13, and this man showed up. She was separated, and this other guy showed up, and he was real nice. There was something real different about him. You know, he was quiet. You know, he seemed to have patience. He laughed. You know, didn't yell. He laughed. That was real strange. And us kids took a vote, and we decided who the next one should be. And we also pointed out to her she wasn't real good at picking, and it was time she let us do the picking. And fortunately, they loved one another. That made it easier for us to control the situation. And they ended up getting together. But I still had access to this first stepfather I had. And when I hit 17, I decided to go job hunting in Seattle. And this is a disease, and it took a long time for me to really hook into the fact that this was not a personal attack on me. I needed a place to stay. And I just, in my mind, couldn't understand the alcoholism, you know. This was the first father I'd ever known. And so I stayed at his place, and he came home drunk. And I sound like my mother. I could answer the phone as a teenager, and they'd think it was my mother, and I'd get the best gossip in the world, you know. I knew about all the grown-ups. I looked like my mother. And I've been fighting that all my life, but now it's pretty comfortable to say that. She's an okay lady. But I stayed there, and he came home drunk, and he crawled in bed, and he decided I was my mother. And I say that because I think it's real important for us to talk about that sometimes, you know. I think it's important to recognize that part of this disease also is that there are some things that happen in those homes that we carry around and we feel like somehow there's something wrong. There's something we did wrong. You know, the only thing I did wrong is I trusted and forgot to recognize that an alcoholic, when drinking, has no control over what they do, and their sense of reality is not on-based. When I fought him off, his sexual advances off, I then took a lot of verbal abuse and was told I was less than as a female and as a daughter. I did what every good child from an alcoholic home will do. I didn't tell anybody. I never said a word. All they knew was that I came back from that week over there, and I never called him again. I never spoke to him. When he died, and he died of alcoholism at the age of 51, I stood at the end of his bed, and my prayer was, I hope you hurt every goddamn second. My hatred for that man had turned to some monster that I carried inside. You know, I had no ability to forgive. And part of the inability to forgive is I wouldn't tell anybody what happened. So what I did is I walked around feeling like if I hadn't gone there, if I hadn't accepted his help, if I hadn't, it must be my fault. And I really carried that for a long time, and one of the things that I had to work at real hard when I first came in Al-Anon is learning how to make amends and how to forgive someone who's dead. You know? And I couldn't understand how I was going to do that, but you guys showed me and taught me how. You know? And the big thing is I had to forgive myself that I had not done anything wrong, you know, and that he really was out of touch with reality, and he was not deliberately trying to hurt me, you know. I got married at 18. I call it the aggravate my mother marriage. My mother kept telling me that I was like her, that I was independent, strong-willed, opinionated, pushy, domineering. I said, I'm none of those things. Then you have me do a fourth step. I'm all of them. And so I went out and I sort of picked the biggest wimp in town. To prove that I was not a strong-willed woman. And at 18, you're not even a woman yet, but I was going to prove it. My father was not, the adoption process started when I was 16. It got completed when I was 36. That tells you procrastination is a problem in our home. But all the way down the aisle, my father kept saying, you don't have to do this. I was pregnant. And the main thing is I had already started developing, had a well-set pattern of, if I say I'm going to do something, by God, I will do it. And it doesn't matter how bad it's going to hurt me, how much I don't want to do it anymore. If I made a statement over here, it will happen over here. And that's real good in the workplace, but it's sure not very good in your personal life. Everything was written in concrete. And that's because I learned back there that don't get caught being wrong. If you're not right, you're in trouble. And I ran my life sort of like a court of law. At work, sometimes things come up and people go, oh, I thought you were just bluffing. And I can say, you need to understand, I don't bluff. If I go toe-to-toe with somebody, I got the facts, the documents, and I'm ready to nail your backside. Because I don't go to battle unless I know I can win. I used to think I was real spontaneous. Well, I learned I'm not spontaneous. I don't even gamble unless I got it fixed. Because I'm scared to death of things that are ambiguous. They frighten me. And that's that child who doesn't know what's going to happen. I got to have some control. I got to have some options. Even when I was doing things that could put me in jail, I knew what the results would be. I thought out how I felt, thought out if I pay the price tag, and then I did it. My whole life has been that way. It's always planned. Even the bad stuff is planned. But I had married and tried to be what I thought was a good wife. And I had no basis of this. Now, this man is not an alcoholic, comes from an alcoholic family. He's a diabetic, and that keeps his drinking in line. So the first husband wasn't. But he was very passive. I was very aggressive and very sick. And I tried to fit this role, though. I had this image. TV did a marvelous thing for us. Told us what we should be. And so I worked, and I maintained a house. I hadn't been to school for accounting yet, and I had a perpetual inventory sheet on the inside of my cupboards before I knew what a perpetual inventory was. The floors were stripped and waxed every Thursday, sheets were changed, furniture was polished, laundry was done, Friday was grocery shopping. If I put a can of green beans in, the inventory went up. If I took it out, perfection. I must be perfect. If I am not perfect, you will not like me, you will not love me, you will not be there for me. And it damn near killed me. I ended up realizing there was something missing in this marriage, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So having been raised, there were lots of kids, obviously, what must be missing is a child. And I have one child. He was planned. That tells you how I feel about childhood and being a mother. I love him dearly, but I like him a lot better as a 19-year-old than as a 6-year-old. Because I had no intentions of having children. But it was, again, something outside of me. If I do something, this marriage will get better. Well, what happened is it meant I had 2 children in the house, and I decided I only needed a real small child. I didn't need a big child. And so I left the marriage. And there were a lot of other things going on at that point in time, but I wasn't prepared to be a wife, and I wasn't prepared to be a mother. I wasn't prepared to be me, let alone be there for anybody else. And I am an extremist, so I went from being, let's be Miss Good Housekeeping of America, to who gives a shit. If it comes in styrofoam, it must be okay. Thank you, McDonald's. And I sort of kept the house so the health department didn't seal it up as a public hazard. And once in a while cooked, but not often. My idea, and still is some days, if I'm one of my Al-Anon slips, is that the way you do laundry is you go shopping. Self-discipline is a real problem for me. I like to play. I came from a house of, the way you handle money, see, is you play and you do all that stuff, and then you worry about paying the rent and the utilities and stuff, you know. Playing is always the utmost. That takes precedent. And so if I'm not being compulsive about being perfect responsible, then I'm being very serious about being a play person. The marriage didn't work, needless to say, and I had a child. And at about 3.5 years, I gave my child to his father, who was remarried, and lived in a house in the country, and I just felt it was best considering all the things that were happening. And I proceeded to try to find some way to find myself, find somebody to love me, and find an answer to life. About 2 years later, I hooked up with someone I had known for some time. And he came fresh out of prison. Hey, my kind of guy, you know. There's something about living on the edge. You know, when you're dead inside, when you're really dead. And I finally came to realize that to be able to be a child of 3.5 and watch her mother be beat on a weekly basis, I had to shut down. You know, I had to have turned myself off emotionally. There's no way a child's psyche can go through that and not start shutting down that early. You know, I work with Alateens now, and I hear how early those kids start turning off. You know, how early they stop feeling. You know, so when you're shut down, to be able to have any feelings, you've got to do extremes. You've got to be on the edge of life. You know, and every part of my life was that way, an extreme. If I wanted to feel, it had to be extreme. It had to be life or death. And so somebody who was out of prison and two-time convicted felon at this point. When we separated, it was a 3-time convicted felon. And I became involved in drug dealing, and I discovered that if you carry a 8mm automatic and you're back up for an old man who's a heroin addict, you can have some feelings. There's a little excitement to life. You know, it gets through that 6-foot concrete wall that you've put up so people can't hurt you. And also people remain transient in what you do as you continue to confirm what you learned. Don't count on anybody. Cover your back. You know, and everybody's moving on. Nobody's staying. And nobody really gives a shit, anyhow. So why care? You know. Ended up in a halfway house with him. I was a very good, supportive, Al-Anon type spouse. When it came time, the third bus came down, parole got violated. The terms of the parole reinstatement were 2 that affected me. One was that he could go to the halfway house if I was there, because I seemed to be a base of stability. Anybody recognize that? Oh, you're so strong, you're so stable, you're so there. Why can't you fix him? You know. And the other one was that we get married. And that one, I still have a problem with that one. There was a parole officer that did not understand alcoholism and drug addicts. And he felt that if he was married to me, he would be more responsible. Now, what he didn't understand is when you talk about getting married, you're talking about your credit rating, financial and legal responsibilities. It's not going to make an alcoholic more responsible, What it did is it gave him a security blanket that I couldn't pick up and leave that quick. And so we ended up getting married in a halfway house and lived in the halfway house. And I started losing any sense of what little reality I had. And I had made a commitment, as I said earlier, there's a commitment thing. And I had made a commitment that I would be there as emotional support for this man. And I did love him, but I knew being married was going to totally destroy this, the relationship. I knew it. His attitude towards marriage, we had an agreement. I took care of the essentials, he took care of the entertainment. And I would see him when I saw his face. And I didn't question about some of the little presents he brought home or the girlfriends he called. It had nothing to do with it. Because the bottom line is I didn't think I was worth any more than that. I figured the only way I could have somebody is be willing to share him. And that I had no right to ask for anybody to take care of me. If I didn't take care of myself, then that's too bad. And that's the survivor that I got as a kid. And I'm glad I got it, because I picked a lot of people who would not help take care of me. I picked a lot of people who couldn't be there for themselves, let alone there for me. And so, that survivor got me through until I found these rooms. But I reached the point in this halfway house that I was really going over the edge. And we had a friend who was a counselor, and the commitment thing was practically killing me. And she finally stood me in front of him and said, release her from her word. And he had no idea what she was talking about, and she said, I don't have time because we're going to lose her here. She's going to go off the edge. Release her from her commitment to stay here and be a support for you, because she can't do it for herself. And at that time, I just knew I was almost like a zombie, and I was, and I had a doctor. I've had a doctor since I was 19 years old who would come to the house and give me a shot of Demerol and a shot of Mellarel, and that would keep my nerves in line periodically. And Valium was a regular part of my survival of dealing. But he didn't understand, but he released me. And what I understand now is that I was so convinced that if I ever went back on a commitment or a word, that I wouldn't be anything, that I would have stayed there and ended up probably put in a mental hospital or having killed one of the other residents, because I had horrible temper. For a number of years, I didn't live any place that didn't have holes in walls. They say that people who come from abusive homes become abusers. Well, I made a point to have 2 husbands that were 5'9", 135 pounds. Now, I'm not a lightweight, so you know what happened when they came up on me. And so, unfortunately, both husbands were somewhat physically abused, And a drunk is so easy. That's another thing we like to talk about. So a lot of us, when they're drunk, beat the shit out of our alcoholics, I mean, their reflexes are a little slow, they're not quite all there, And I used to nail my alcoholic when he was drunk, sort of pick him up about 4 inches off the floor and clip him, and then I'd tell him he'd hit his head on a banister. You can do more damage with a blackout, or let them think that they're seeing things. We were out in the country one night, and there was wild cattle and snakes. Now, I admitted I saw the wild cattle, but I told him I didn't see the snakes. That really messed with him for about a week. He saw snakes and I didn't. We are a very vicious, sick lot. And give me a blackout, man, I could make guilt and remorse for months with a blackout. Lie through my teeth. Man may have been passed out in the corner the whole time, right? But I could give him one hell of a story. And that's called manipulation. That is manipulation. And sometimes we like to pretend like, oh, poor us, we just sat there and got beat down and verbally abused and left abandoned. Hell, we're terrors when we get crossed sometimes, And we're the ones who remember what was said and done. They're sitting there going, God, did I really do that? We sometimes do an awful lot with their sickness to help keep them sick and keep us in control. But I finally left there, and we ended up going through a process. Now, in '77, I went to an Al-Anon meeting. I went to three Al-Anon meetings. And I did what a lot of people do, is I got just enough to mess me up a little more. I heard the first half of the first step. It's not my fault. Now, any control this man had on me at this point was gone at that point. It wasn't, I didn't do it. I heard the 3 C's. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. Oh, whoopee. Now, the second half that it made my life unmanageable, that had nothing to do with me. I was perfect. I mean, I paid the rent, and I paid the utilities, and I kept the groceries in. I was putting him through college. I held a job, was promoting up in the bank into management. There was nothing wrong with me. And everybody around me would tell me so, too. See, that's part of the real sadness about this disease, is those people out there do not understand. So when they see us active in our Al-Anon disease, they think we're being good people, They really are in there saying, yeah, he's so lucky to have you. You're there for him, and you're loyal, and you're caring. No, I'm running up a debt. Man, this sucker owes me down the road, And that's what I'm doing. I'm not being loving and caring and supportive, I'm being controlling and enabling. And one of the things I had to realize when I was with about six months in this program is that the first person I had to make amends to was the alcoholic, because I didn't want him to get sober. If he got sober, he might leave me. If he got sober, I'd lose control. What I wanted controlled drinking. I wanted the same thing the alcoholic wants. I wanted his drinking to stay at that level where I could do the manipulation. Stay at that level where he could go ahead and say feelings to me that he couldn't stay sober. Because see, this man couldn't tell me he loved me sober. But give him about 5 scotches, he loved the hell out of me. You know? I wanted it at a maintenance level. You know, and it took a long time. We're talking 5 rehab centers, a halfway house, and 2 jail sentences. And I'm screaming and carrying on, I want this man sober. I want you sober. You're sober, blah, 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 blah. You know. The truth is I didn't want him sober. I wanted control. I wanted that level of where he was drunk gave me just what I wanted. You know. And so when I realized I did is every time he tried to get sober until I came into Al-Anon, I undermined it in very subtle ways. You know. I was not a support in his attempts at sobriety previously. You know, because that's not really what I wanted. You know. But anyhow, that was out on the West Coast. I hit the Al-Anon. And from that point on, it made life easier. I no longer had to lift him up off people's living room floors. I'd say, it's not my fault. Call the cops if you want. I'm going home. And I'd leave him. I'd leave him in bars, in people's homes. If I come home and he wasn't home yet, I would, leave notes saying, well, it looks like we're each supposed to take care of ourselves, and I'd leave for a day or two, I was not a good wife. No matter what those people out there who did not understand this disease, I was not a good wife. We ended up moving out here. When he got out of college, he got an opportunity for a real career move, and we moved out here. And things went downhill. Alcoholism is a progressive disease. Al-Anon, I think, progresses too. As they get crazier, we get crazier. As people get deader in the household, it takes more extreme behavior to get noticed. And so as the disease progressed, so did my behavior. I continued to punch holes in walls. I continued to throw things. I reached the point where I no longer argued about him sleeping with women. What I argued about is him lying to them that he was planning to leave his wife. Because I said, you have no intentions of doing that. I'm the biggest safety valve you got. As long as you got me, you don't have to make a commitment to them. You don't have to take a risk. I left him once, and we went through the little process, and I'm sure a lot of you went through, well, now if you don't drink and you do this and you do that, you can come back. So we were separated about 4 months, and he came back, and I slid right back into it. I used my job for a lot of my self-worth. I spent the whole time working, and work was where I really got my sense of being okay in that area. But the minute you took me out of the workplace, I started falling apart. And even then, at the end, I lost that. Wives don't make men get sober generally. For a lot of women alcoholics, it's when the kids start being pulled away, the husband leaves the house, because that's where our sort of, sense of well-being is. But for a lot of men, it's the employer. And in my ex-husband's case, it was the employer. The employer was highly opposed to the empty vodka bottle in the desk drawer and him passed out at the desk. I don't understand that. He had been doing it in the bathroom for years. He just couldn't make it to the bathroom. And so they told him get his act together and get him to treatment and do it seriously this time, or they would fire him. And part of the treatment, he went to PI up in MacArthur Boulevard in Washington, D.C. And part of the program there is that they have family stuff. So I went in, and to visit on Sunday, you have to go to Al-Anon. That's the way it was then. And as a good Al-Anon, I would do anything to be able to be there and visit and take care of and all that stuff. So I went to the Al-Anon meetings. And I thought this was all, very nice. And I remember having gone to some in the past, and the people there seemed to be okay and happy and whatever. But, so I went, and this time I was ready to listen. That was the bottom line. Because I reached the point that I reached the point of desperateness of having somebody hold me, of having a husband touch me, that I could put myself into hysterics. And by the time he hit PI, and even after, I would put myself into, and this is very hard to say because it's, man, it really shows how sick I was when I came to these rooms. I would become hysterical and would double up my fists and beat on myself. And that would make him frightened enough that I would hurt myself, that he would then put his arms around me and hold me so that I would not throw myself against the wall and beat myself in the face. And that was the only way. And that's how sick I was. That's how desperate I was for somebody to just put their arms around me. Thank goodness I'm very good at makeup. I could cover the yellow bruises on my face. So anybody who tries to tell me that we don't get real sick and that our lives aren't in danger, I just know they don't understand this disease. We become as desperate as the alcoholic to feel better, and we don't know how to do it. So anyhow, I sat in these rooms for a few Sundays, and I heard a woman, and she was so calm, I mean, her face was relaxed. She didn't have that, I'm going to tear the world apart look. And she just had everything I wanted, She seemed to have it. And she had one more thing. She lived with an active alcoholic and compulsive gambler. And at this point, I was convinced that this alcoholic was never going to get sober. So I picked my first sponsor from that basis. I want somebody who knows how to live with the active situation and be that comfortable, because I'm never going to have sobriety in my home, but something's got to change because I'm dying. What basically happened is I started going to meetings. I started listening. And I have a sponsor who said to me, if you're only going to go 3 meetings a week, don't bother. It's only going to make you sicker. It'll give you just enough to find out how sick you are, but not enough to get better. And she was real right. I mean, she understood how sick I was. And so I started off in Al-Anon by going to 12 to 14 meetings a week. Al-Anon became my lifeblood. I socialized with Al-Anon people. I had people, a list of people I could call at 3 and 4 in the morning because that's when it got real tough. And it really worked. And people loved me for me, as sick as I was. They loved me, and they cared and they listened, But what they did is they also kept saying, "What about you? What about you?" I spent my whole life, worrying about other people, trying to please other people. And what I kept getting told is, how do you feel? What's going on with you? What do you want? And I couldn't answer those questions when I came in. I didn't know how I felt. I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew that I didn't want what I had, and all I felt was angry. So what happened is about 6 months in Al-Anon, the marriage came to an end. And these programs don't fix marriages. They get people sober and they give us some self-esteem and self-worth so that we can, believe we're worth good things in life. And then the offshoot of that is whether a marriage survives or doesn't survive. We're friends now. It took some time. There was a lot of hostility and anger on my part. I really resented the hell out of the fact that I paid for the college degree and somebody was spending the paycheck. Because he very quickly was with someone else. But we now talk on a regular basis, and it's through the grace of these programs that we can do that. He's remarried. He's got a baby on the way. He's starting a company, he's happy. Those are the things he wants. And what I discovered in recovery is we're not alike. The only thing we had in common was the sickness. That we have different values in life, we have different things we want in life, we even have different lifestyles we're comfortable with. He's a yuppie. I mean, he's got the too much power PC and the floor-shine shoes and the 6 suits and the 2 cars and the stock portfolio. That's all nice, but I'm not interested, And I realize in recovery that it's okay. We talk and he's happy that my life is. We were sick together for a long time and we did a lot of damage to one another. And it's nice that the programs allow us to still care and not have to hate. At about a year and a half, I got my son back. Now, I'm the granddaughter of, the daughter of, the ex-wife of and the mother of a recovering alcoholic and addict. I think I qualify. Basically what happened is at one point there was a big child custody battle and I lost. And my son was with his father. And at that time I said that to my son, things like the alcoholic half of our family, and that is, let's see, if I do this, this is what will happen. Oh hell, it's worth it. His father is a very passive human being. He doesn't understand that kind of thought process. So at 6, at 6 my son told his dad to shut up, and he did. So that tells you how much control he had over this boy. And by the time the boy was 11, he was 6'1" and 180 pounds, and Dad is 5'9" and 140. So there wasn't a lot of control. And I got a phone call one morning. He had threatened to kill his stepmother. And I knew I had told him sometime before that what they were dealing with was a drug situation and they should get some help. And I was told I didn't know what I was talking about, and I just sort of chuckled. I knew exactly what I was talking about. As I got a phone call, I'm going to lock him up till he's 21 or you take him as is. It's a program. The program's put me in a position where I could say, put him on a plane. And I started dealing with a teenager who had an alcohol problem. An alcohol and an anger, because his child had been abandoned. Mama left. Mom was too sick to even know to call or to send birthday cards. He didn't know if I was dead or alive half the time. He knew I was a drug dealer. And I was supposed to show up someplace and I wouldn't show up, and it'd take me 2 weeks to get, back together enough and on track to call and say, oh, by the way, I had to work, So he was a real angry child. But a child, like so many of us, who is real angry and yet feels like there's a conflict between saying, I'm angry with you and I love you. And so to him, he had to make a choice. And we went through a lot of changes of helping him understand that he can love me and be angry with me at the same time. And that's something that's been real hard for me to learn in these rooms, is that I can be angry at somebody I love, let them know I'm angry. And that doesn't mean I stop loving them or they stop loving me. It just means I'm angry. I'm upset about something, and it's okay. So we went through, I jokingly say, if there's an adolescent treatment center within Maryland, Virginia, or D.C., I probably know about it and have been there. We went through the school counseling, the expulsion, DICAP, PG County Juvenile Psychiatric, Dominion Psychiatric Rehab Center, Second Genesis, Excel, Crownsville, Bethany House, and Wexter. And then the Army got him. But the thing that got me through that, the thing that let me be the kind of parent I wanted to be that I had never been able to be, was AA and Al-Anon. Because those people in AA, whose parents had let them get away with it, told me how much damage it did. And those people whose parents had kicked them out at 15 or 16 years old told me how much good it did. And you people in Al-Anon said, he is just a drunk. He may be your son, but he's got the disease, and you can't treat him any different. And unacceptable behavior is unacceptable behavior no matter who it comes from. And you don't have to live with it. My son was into gang fighting, and a few other things in PCP. And basically what it came down to is I locked him out of the house, and I turned him into the courts, and I held him accountable. And I watched him hate me, and that was real painful. And it's only because you guys kept telling me this will work. This is what you have to do, because first you have to take care of you, and you can't live with a kid who, when you leave to work, is trashing your house and using drugs, and having things disappear from the house. I stood up in a courtroom, and I was the only one of about 40-some parents who said, I will not take my son home. I cannot control him, and therefore I don't feel I should be held legally or financially responsible. And the magistrate looked at me and says, you can't answer that way. And I wanted to rip her face off, because I had just stood there with a kid this big who was using PCP, right, and said, I'm not taking you home. And he turned and looked at me like, I'm going to kill your goddamn ass. I hate you. And she sent me out of the courtroom with that kid. And I'm going, And I did a lot of praying, and I called a lot of people and said, how'd you like to come over for coffee till about 4 in the morning, you know? and you did it. You know, there were people sitting in my living room because I was afraid to be in my own home. You know, and you gave me the courage to keep doing what I had to do. You know, and I continued to do it. And I continued to watch the look in his face. And what finally happened is I was trying to fix him, you know. I guess that's what mothers do, you know. And I finally hit a point, was a phrase that I'd heard, and that is, some must die so others may live. And I finally hit a point of sitting in my home group Al-Anon room at a meeting with tears running down my face, and finally said, maybe my son is going to be one of those who dies. And maybe his death will make another teenager live. And it was so funny. It's how that is how this stuff works, though. It's once I did that, once I let go, once I said, you know, it's up to his God. You know, if he makes it. It's up to him and his God. I got nothing to do with it. Things changed. You know, I stepped out of the way and things changed. And he started to get together. And it's not that it's all great. We still have a lot of screaming matches, and he still decided that it would be a good idea to take a counselor's car and go cash somebody's check, you know. And that was without drugs in him, folks, you know. But he lives with me now. And he's just decided to join the Navy and become a SEAL, you know, which I'm real ecstatic about. I'm happy and I'm scared for him, you know. But it's changed. You know, we talk. You know, and sometimes I have to just step back. He does not have the kind of recovery program I'd like my son to have. You know, but that's not my program and it's not my life. You know, I have a little hard time sometimes detaching and saying, you know, he goes to one meeting a month. How's he going to stay clean and sober with that? You know, but that's his sobriety and his recovery. It's not mine. The rules stay the same, whether he's using or not using. There are rules in the house. You live by those rules or you don't live by the rules. It's up to you. You know, and I'll love you no matter what you do, but I will not accept unacceptable behavior. And that's what you folks taught me. I've also discovered that it's okay to let somebody take care of you, and that's real tough. You know, I have recently got involved in a relationship, and it sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. You know, but I've never crowned it on anybody. You know, even through all these years. You know, it'll be 8 years in March now on, and I still have a hard time saying I can count on somebody being there tomorrow. You know, it's real hard for me because I always believe that people are just going to pick up and leave in the middle of the night. You know, and when the rent comes due, you better come up with the money because you're not going to have it. And when you're sick, you better know how to call from the bedroom to the bathroom because nobody's going to be there to make you a cup of tea, you know, or help you out. And I still have a hard time with that. And basically, someone's been put in my life who that seems to be a very natural behavior for them, you know. And I'm able to say, I'm afraid. You know, I'm scared to death. I'm scared to really trust, you know. But I have people around me who keep saying, Georgia, don't you think it's time to give it another chance? You know, don't you think possibly your selection process might be a little better? You know, that you're not picking the same type of people anymore? And I ended up talking and trying to work it through, and someone said, yeah, you've had a real fine program. You know, and your life's got real comfortable, but it's real lonely, isn't it? And that's what it's about. You know, I've jokingly said, show me somebody with a perfect Al-Anon program and they do not have a relationship. You know? They are living alone. You know? Because nothing will set you up for an Al-Anon slip quicker than anything than all of a sudden being together with somebody. You know? And, but what I found myself doing unconsciously is giving up my games before I played them. You know, my pride and my ego and my insecurity is so great that we had a picnic and I was going down. I didn't know anybody hardly, and it was sort of out of my turf. I'm sort of city, you know, and I was able to say before we went, here's what my behavior is. I am dreadfully afraid of public humiliation and rejection. Public rejection just scares the hell out of me. And I dealt with a lot of it. There were a lot of New Year's Eves that I went around at midnight like this for a husband, and he was with another woman in the middle of the room. That's a little embarrassing, you know. And so I always protect myself, you know. And the way I protect myself is I pretend like I don't care. It doesn't matter. No big deal. I didn't like you anyhow, you know. And so before we went, you know, I was able, without even having to fight it, it just naturally seemed to be what came up, and that's what you taught me. To sit down and say, here's the game. I'm real scared about this weekend. I'm real afraid these people won't accept me, and, you know, they won't like me. Now, if I sit standoffish and I start acting like, you know, I just don't like you or anybody, it's because I'm scared, you know. And the second surprise I got, not just me saying it, the other surprise was that through that weekend when I started getting that little scared feeling, this person was there and just touched me and said, it's okay, you're doing fine, you know, and moved on. Didn't suffocate me, you know, but just let me know it was okay. And that was like, this is a whole new ballgame, folks. I don't know what to do with it, you know, but I'm staying. You know, you told me when things get good, don't run. And that's my gut reaction. It's getting good, let's run. I might get used to this. There's someone I met recently who says that our sponsor offered her a sandwich one time, and she said no. She said, well, aren't you arguing? She said, well, I don't want to get used to eating. Yeah. That's sort of me, you know. I don't want to get used to being treated good and loved and cared about because, you know, it might go away. And so I'm forcing myself. This is a real work. It's a real job to force myself to let somebody be nice to me, you know, and be able to believe he'll be there tomorrow. And that's the tough stuff. Al-Anon gave me one other little gift, you know. It gave me my family. My mother and I interact well, and I love her, and I accept her for as she is, you know. And she's even grown as the offshoot of talking to a daughter in the program. It gave me my son. It got me out of a marriage that I probably would have stayed and allowed myself, because, see, he never said, I want to leave. I finally said, it's not I love you any less, but for the first time I love me. And I don't feel I deserve to be treated this way, you know. So it got me out of a situation that was very emotionally abusive, as well as sometimes physically. It gave me one other thing, and I always like to give Al-Anon credit for this. It gave me part of my sobriety. I'm a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. And I came to Al-Anon first, and I had two walls in denial. And the first one is everybody else's fault. You know, I am not responsible. It's all the other drunks and addicts in my life, you know. And Al-Anon got me through that wall, you know, and said, you are responsible for your life. If you are unhappy, it is your fault, you know. If you're in financial problems, it's your responsibility. If you haven't been able to do things in life you want to do, it's because you didn't do them. Nobody chained you to the wall. Nobody locked you in a room, you know. And it got me through that wall. And a lot of my drinking and driving was because people did not meet my expectations. Because my feelings got hurt and I didn't think I was worth anything better, you know. And so I always have to give Al-Anon credit, because you got me through that first wall, you know, so I could then look at the wall of my alcoholism and drug addiction and how I'd use that to keep the feelings shut off. You know, I'd shut the feelings down with substances as well, you know, to deal with being from the environment I came from. And I don't blame them, it's just a fact, it's just the way it was, you know. And I'm always real grateful, because lots of times, if it weren't for the Al-Anon meetings I get to, I'm not sure I'd be able to deal with the feelings that come up and the insecurities and the uncertainties about how to live a different life, you know. And when I don't know what to do, when I get scared as a drunken addict, part of the way I do that is to probably jump on a substance, you know, something to shut me down so I don't have to go through the pain, you know. And I've been real blessed with a lot of people who are called double winners in my life, or AA and Al-Anon, you know. And it's real hard to tell, because what I've come to realize is the only difference is the alcoholic smells and the Al-Anon doesn't. You know? Otherwise, we're exactly the same. And and I want to thank you folks for sitting and listening. And I was real nervous when I came up, and I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling like it's all the same. I told Ellen, I said, until I see a head nod or a smile come across the face, I have to keep telling myself intellectually that It doesn't matter what my accent is, or where I come from, or how I dress. We all feel the same way, scared and lonely, and we just want an answer when we get here. And it's in these rooms. So thank you.
Isn't that powerful? Georgia would like to give you this little gift. Thank you so much. Let's close our meeting with the Lord's Prayer. Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.